Hi everyone, my name is Snoot. I'm the community manager at Coffee Stain Studios, and if you didn't hear the news, last week we released Update 8 on the Early Access branch. Whoopie freaking do. All right, it's finally out, and if you haven't seen the patch notes video, you can check it out here in the card. And yeah. In this video though, we're going to be talking about some good old post Update 8 info. We'll be talking about some of the known issues that we have still in Update 8. We'll be talking about the upcoming patch that's coming up next week on Experimental. I'll also be addressing the state of Fixmas, because I know you guys have been asking about that like non-stop. Okay, what's the deal with Fixmas? I'll tell you in a second, all right? And finally, I've got some really exciting news regarding a big sale that's going on one of our partnered merch store, lizardago.com. So make sure to stick around for that. So yeah, Update 8 is now out on the Early Access branch after being on the Experimental branch for roughly a decade. Roughly, give or take. And the reception for Update has been pretty great, honestly. But it's not a perfect update by any means. And I kind of wanted to spend a moment, talking about some of the known issues with this update and sort of clarify a bit on the state of things. So the first thing I want to talk about is vehicles in Satisfactory. So in Update 8, we had to completely rework the physics engine because the old physics engine was deprecated in the new Unreal Engine version. That meant that everything that had anything to do with physics in the game had to be essentially reworked from scratch. And vehicles was one of those things in the game that was most affected by this. So the automated side of vehicles is mostly unaffected, as like when we're automating vehicles, it actually doesn't use physics too much to a certain extent. And it's mostly the vehicle, like the manual driving side of things, where vehicles are kind of like a bit different now than they used to be before. That's not to say that like automated routes aren't affected by this. There might be some cases due to like the fact that the turn radius is a bit different on the vehicles, and like the speed and all that stuff is affected. So like the automated routes that you've made previously before Update 8 may still have some impact, but for the most part it should be fine. And when it comes to the manual driving of vehicles, the feedback that we've gotten has been a little bit mixed, to be honest. A lot of people really like the new vehicles. There's also a bunch of people that don't like the new vehicle handling. We've started taking the feedback that we've gotten, and we are going to tweak the vehicles a little bit in the future, but we won't be able to do it for this update essentially. And this is something actually we planned to do for Update 8, we just ran out of time. So this is something that we're gonna look into the future. Next thing I want to talk about is a known issue where ultra-wide monitors support doesn't really work in the game anymore. We used to have a setting in the game that would like maintain the y-axis aspect ratio for like the FOV and stuff like that. And unfortunately, we've had to change sort of our implementation of how the FOV handling works in the game and scaling equipment and all that stuff, which meant that the functionality for maintaining the y-axis that we use for wide monitors is broken at the moment. And it will be broken for some time because we haven't had time to look into it, and we probably won't have time to look into it for some time, unfortunately, because we need to sort of make a completely new implementation for that. So just be aware that that setting is currently broken, and we'll look into it further down the line. One thing we also noticed that every time people download a patch to the game, the first like initial boot up of the game once it's been installed is quite slow, and it takes quite long for the game to actually start up and get to the main menu. And the reason for that we found is due to antivirus doing like a big scan on all the modules that are in the game. And this can take quite some time actually for some people. And one side effect of this is that once it's doing the scan, it sort of blocks the game from booting up. The login process that we have sort of times out, and so that means that when you actually get into the game, the login process sort of fails, and you're signed out, and you're offline. And whenever you try and start a new save file, it will tell you that you're offline. And the only way to sort of get around that is to just restart the game and restart the sign-in process essentially. So it's kind of recommended that whenever you download a patch, just like let it run that slow boot up and then restart the game once you get into the main menu, so the next boot up is like everything's fine. We're gonna try and reach out to Microsoft and see if we can look into as to why this is happening, because this has happened across the board for every antivirus software. So we're gonna try and figure out what's going on there. Next thing I want to talk about is belts. Some people have reported that they've noticed some weird flickering happening on belts, and there's like some weird artifacting going on. This can be multiple things. It could either be the upscaling setting. Remember that we've added support for like DLSS, FSR, and TSR upscaling options in the game. One common issue with some of these upscaling options is that like fast movement and fast motions can produce like these weird artifacts. And that's what's happening on some of the faster belts in the game. And currently, the only way to get around that is to just not use one of the upscaling options and just set the game to use TAA or FXAA or, no anti-aliasing or whatever. and that should get rid of the artifacting. But there's also an issue where sometimes on the belts, some items can appear to be there, but they're not there, or like the highlighting works, but there's nothing there on the belt. And this is more so a rendering issue with the belts. We're aware of this issue. We didn't have time to fix it for update 8 because the solution is quite involved to get around that fix. So another thing that we're doing later down the line. Another known issue is that some of the factory animations can quite aggressively slow down. Sometimes it doesn't actually affect any of the performance of the factories and like that. They'll still produce the same way. That's purely a visual thing. So like the machines will still produce just fine. It's just that the animation won't update as frequently. Next thing I want to talk about is some issues in multiplayer. There are a couple of like weird things happening in multiplayer sometimes. We've had to focus a bit more on single player for this update in particular. So we obviously want to maintain multiplayer as much as we can. This is obviously a game that's meant to be played online and with friends. There might be some issues here and there that we've hadn't had time to patch up. One of the biggest offenders is that using hypertubes as clients can lead to some pretty weird and gnarly situations where there's a lot of rubber banding, or you might even end up in like weird states. We are aware of that issue. We're going to look into it. That's for further down the line once we have more time to polish sort of the multiplayer aspect of things. Also, it's recommended to sort of look into the network settings so you might have that can actually resolve some of these issues. So like setting it to ultra if your bandwidth can supply that is, because it can actually get worse if you don't have a fast internet connection. So you can always play around with those settings, and that goes both for host and clients, by the way. So I think we said this before, Satisfactory doesn't have controller support. We don't know if we're gonna have native controller support in the future or not. But one thing that people have noticed is that there used to be a legacy setting in the menu where if you plugged in a controller, you could still play Satisfactory to a certain degree with a controller. And there used to be like a setting that you can enable to sort of do that. But now that setting is completely gone. And people might be wondering, like, why did we remove this functionality if we had like some support for controllers and now we just have none? And the reason why we completely removed all legacy options for controller support in the game is because now it's possible to remap controllers to keyboard and mouse using third-party software or using Steam's own controller mapping thingamajig that they have. Because previously there were a couple of keybinds that wasn't possible to do just because the game already had sort of some control over controllers. So now we completely remove that so that people can use Steam's controller mapping or any other third-party software mapping thingy to bind controllers themselves. Last thing I want to talk about are crashes and performance. So the vast majority of crashes are related to mods. So if you have any mods installed, please try playing the game without mods and see if you can reproduce the crash. The next most common crashes are related to hardware, and it's mostly GPU related crashes. And some of these crashes are kind of hard for us to do too much about, but they can be resolved on your end. We have a couple of like FAQs and troubleshooting guides on like our Steam forums and Discord and our website and stuff like that. But here are some top troubleshooting tips from Snoot, right? Top troubleshooting tips to Snoot. All right, here we go. So first things first, make sure to update drivers to your graphics card and even consider switching to studio drivers for your graphics cards. This tends to resolve a lot of these issues. And in some cases, you might also want to do like a clean install of your graphics card drivers, because that can also solve a lot of issues when people say they are on latest drivers and then they do a clean install and that actually solves it. So also consider doing that. The next thing you can try is resetting the shader cache. How to do this depends on what graphics card you have. So I recommend like Googling your graphics card and how to reset the shader cache. So look into that. And another common thing you can try is switching the rendering API that we use. So the game by default uses DirectX 12, but you can also try switching it to DirectX 11. And if you're really daring, you can try switching it to Vulkan. But it's important to note that some people may have switched to DirectX 11 in the past because they've had issues with DirectX 12. The game is targeted toward DirectX 12, and there might be some new issues due to DirectX 11, and there's better support for DirectX 12 now. So some people might still have the setting where the game boots up in DirectX 11 and that causes issues, and then switching back and trying DirectX 12 actually resolves some of these issues. So yeah, recommend checking them out and trying them out and see which one works. As always, something you can do is verify your game files either via Steam or Epic in the settings. Some people have also had the issue where they needed to make a clean install of the game, so like just verifying wouldn't work. They actually needed to like completely remove everything and reinstall the game. Remember to back up your save files if you do this. Save files aren't saved in the same directory, as your installed directory and whatnot. But I'm just saying that anyways, it's always good to like just Always back up your save files, okay? I can't stress that enough. You never know what can go wrong. You can sort of tell when the crash is related to something to do with your graphics card. If in the crash reporter, in the call stack, you see it mentioning something like, you know, D3, D11, or like DirectX, or GPU, or render thread, or like device hung. It's a real shame whenever you get a device that's too hung, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, for the most part, when it comes to stability for the game, this is actually one of the most stable releases we've had. I do want to touch a little bit on performance as well and talk a little bit about that. So from the data that we can see, for the vast majority of players, the performance is actually like on par, if not better, than it was before. And it's nice to see that like a lot of people are having a pretty smooth experience with the game. But that's not the case for everyone. And I kind of want to acknowledge like for some of those people that are seeing like worse performance on Update 8 than in 7. Whenever I talk to people that have run into performance issues, it has, for the most cases, been due to hardware not meeting minimum requirements and running out of VRAM and that kind of stuff. It's important to note that like with this update, we needed to raise the minimum requirements for the game, and we might need to sort of revisit this maybe more in the future to better fit like which cards we list in the minimum requirements. Because there might be some cases where, you know, some hardware are like fit to fight in terms of like performance, but doesn't have like drivers that are maintained anymore. And we realized that this is really frustrating for people that maybe don't meet the minimum requirements and were able to play the game before but can't now. And you know, this is sort of the backside of working on a game that is in early access and still being in active development, having to sort of leave people behind in this regard. But the thing was that when we were in Update 7, we were sort of like pushing the engine as far as we could, if like in the terms of what we were using it for and what we could do, and we saw a lot of potential in doing even more. Now we're sort of more primed to be able to better optimize the game and go even further, you know, on current gen hardware. So we feel a lot more optimistic with the new engine, being able to do more with the game than we were able to do before. So those are some of the known issues with Update 8. Now I want to talk about the future, and the future is next week, old man, because next week we're going to be releasing a patch on experimental for Update 8 where we update the online integration that we have in the game. So if you remember, a couple of weeks ago I posted a video where I mentioned that the online integration for Satisfactory is a bit work in progress. On Update 8 we've had to sort of rework the online integration for the game. And the online integration is the stuff that handles, you know, like you're populating your friends list on Steam and, you know, connecting to Epic and logging you in and all that stuff. So yeah, that system has been sort of reworked in Update 8. It was still a bit work in progress when we left off, and it's a bit work in progress on the early access branch right now. So next week we're going to push a patch with an update to the online integration. So one thing we've done in the new online integration is that we now make it so that on Steam, Epic Online Services will be opt-in from now on. If you don't know what Epic Online Services are, it's essentially the service you use to be able to handle connectivity and, you know, be able to play with your friends and enable crossplay. I think that's the biggest aspect, really. And now you're going to be able to opt out of that if you want to. So if you're on Steam, you can still play with your Steam friends, but you can only play with your Steam friends if you opt out of this. And if you want to play crossplay, you can opt into the Epic Online Services and be able to play with both Steam and Epic users. So it's essentially more feature-rich if you opt into the Epic Online Services. But now the option is there at least. And another thing I mentioned is account unlinking. So account unlinking, when it comes to like linking your Steam account to your Epic account, that stuff is going to be handled separately now outside of the game. So you're going to be able to go on Epic's website and unlink your Steam account if you want to do that, and you won't have to do it through the game anymore, so to speak. So that stuff is happening on experimental next week. But something that's also happening next week is Fixmas. If you don't know what Fixmas is, it's the seasonal event that we've had in the game since launch. I think we always had it, and it's something that runs through December 1st and like a little bit into January, where presents fall in the sky. You can do more stuff inside of Satisfactory essentially, and Fixmas will make a grand return in Update 8. So we are going to patch up and fix the issues that we've run into with the engine upgrade for Fixmas, and Fixmas is going to run just as usual. There won't be any new content for Fixmas this year. It will essentially be a rerun of last year's Fixmas, but there will be a new calendar. And remember that you can disable Fixmas if you don't want to partake in Fixmas. You do that by disabling seasonal events in the main menu. And last thing I want to talk about is merch, because there's currently a big sale going on at lizarddoggo.com. One of our merch partners, Heroic Replicas, who are hosting lizarddoggo.com, are having the biggest sale ever. So there's a big sale with a bunch of discounts on a lot of stuff. For today only, on Black Friday, there's a special sale on the Jumbo Lizard Doggo and the Confusing Creature storage sack, the big ones. So make sure to grab that before it's too late. I'm really good at this sales pitch thing, huh? So check out lizarddoggo.com to check out all the discounts, and there's also a couple of special coupon codes you can use during checkout that will give you some bonus stuff. You can use the code PENSET for orders over 50 to get a free pen set. You can use SHIP 100 for orders over 100 to get free shipping in US, UK, EU, and Canada. There's also the Lightbox 150 where you get a free Lightbox for orders over $150. And if you use SHIP 200, you get free global shipping for orders over 200. And you can pick any one of these. You can use them on as many orders as you want, but you can only use one per order. And you can find stuff such as like props from the game while supplies last. There's also like knit sweaters and t-shirts and plushies and coffee cups, lanyards, sticker packs, you know, and a pen set. There's a bunch of stuff. Just go to the website and check it out. I promise you it's cool. All right, and that's the video for today. A lot of information. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you're enjoying Up to Date. And as always, stay excellent, and we'll see each other in the next one. Okay, bye-bye! Most people that I've talked to that have had performance issues, I've just told them that it's okay, it happens to everyone. Don't.